In a raging snowstorm, a black delivery driver heading home spotted an elderly woman stranded on a deserted road. While others passed, he stopped, bringing her out of the cold. Learning she needed to reach the hospital for her daughter's birth, he drove her through the blizzard just in time. He didn't know his passenger was the state governor's mother, and his quiet act would change everything. The storm had swallowed everything. The road, the sky, the sound of the city. Elijah Davis could barely see past the windshield of his delivery van as the snow kept coming down in thick, steady sheets. The heater in the dashboard hummed weakly, trying its best, but the cold had a way of sinking into your bones no matter what. It was just past 9 in the evening, but the streets on the edge of Bloomington, Minnesota, already looked abandoned. Street lights stood like lonely sentinels, their orange halos barely cutting through the blizzard. Most people had long retreated into the warmth of their homes. Not Elijah. He gripped the steering wheel tighter as he eased down a side street, tires groaning over the icy road. His fingers, wrapped in worn-out gloves, were stiff from the cold and from the 12-hour shift behind him. He hadn't eaten since morning, but there was one more delivery left, and quitting early wasn't in his blood. Elijah was 30, lean, quiet, thoughtful, a man used to being overlooked. His skin was deep brown, his eyes steady and observant, always reading the world before speaking. His jaw carried a shadow of stubble, and his breath came out in pale clouds that curled inside the van. He wore a navy Parker with faded letters on the back, Anderson freight coat, and a thick beanie pulled low. He didn't dress for looks. He dressed for survival. A slow song crackled on the radio. He turned it down. The silence was louder, but he preferred it. Out here, people didn't talk to drivers like him unless they had to. Just a signature, a nod. Sometimes not even that. It didn't surprise him anymore. Being invisible was part of the job. Then he saw her, a figure in the snow, moving slowly, almost stumbling. Took him a second to register. An old woman, hunched forward, pushing through the wind. She wore a long tan coat that hung too loose on her small frame. Her scarf whipped behind her like it had given up the fight. One hand clutched a canvas bag to her chest, the other barely shielding her face. Elijah's foot eased off the gas. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. She wasn't dressed for this weather, not even clothes, and she was alone. No houses nearby, no traffic, no one walking with her. Just that small bent figure in the middle of a Minnesota snowstorm. A car passed in the opposite direction. Didn't slow down, didn't even swerve. Elijah's heart beat once hard. He looked in the rear view mirror. The woman had stopped, or maybe she'd stumbled. He couldn't tell. He drove another 30 feet, then stopped. For a moment he sat, still, hands on the wheel, staring ahead. The wipers screeched back and forth, the snow slamming into glass like it was trying to break through. His mind split in two. One voice said, "Keep going. She's not your problem. You help, and it backfires. You'll be the one getting blamed." The other voice said, "That could be someone's mom." He clenched his jaw, threw the van into reverse, and slowly backed toward her. The hazard lights clicked on. He parked, climbed out, and was hit with a wall of wind that nearly knocked the door back. Snow bit into his cheeks. The road beneath his boots was slick, uneven. "Ma'am," he called out. No answer. He walked closer, careful not to startle her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were pale, a little confused, but not frightened. Her face was thin, cheeks red from the cold. Wisps of white hair stuck to her temples beneath a gray knit cap. I'm all right," she said softly. Her voice was dry, hoarse from the wind. Just heading to the hospital. He blinked. The hospital, ma'am, that's miles away. She nodded slowly as if convincing herself. My daughter, she's having a baby tonight. Elijah's chest tightened. The way she clutched that bag. The way her lips trembled. It wasn't stubbornness. It was desperation. You can't walk there. Not in this weather. Let me drive you. No, she whispered, shaking her head weakly. Don't want to be a burden. He took a step closer. You're not. She looked at him for a long second. He saw her eyes search his face, maybe measuring something she couldn't name. Then, with a slow nod, she gave in. He reached out his arm. Her hand was cold as ice and trembling. She leaned into him gently, more tired than she wanted to admit. Together they walked back to the van. The storm swirling around them like it didn't care who they were or why they were out here. Elijah opened the door and helped her climb in. Once she was settled, he closed the door gently and jogged around to the driver's side. Inside, the heater whirred to life. She let out a small breath of relief. What's your name, ma'am? He asked. She pulled the scarf from her face, smiled faintly. Eleanor? He nodded. All right, Miss Eleanor. Let's get you warm. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside that old van, for the first time that night, there was warmth. Not from the heater, but from something far quieter, far stronger, something the storm couldn't touch. The van rolled slowly through the snow-covered streets, its headlights cutting soft yellow paths through the storm. Inside, silence sat between them for a moment, broken only by the sound of the heater humming and the occasional rattle of the windshield wipers scraping snow from the glass. Elijah kept one hand on the steering wheel, eyes scanning the road ahead. But every few seconds he glanced toward the woman in the passenger seat. Eleanor was sitting stiffly, both hands clutching the canvas bag on her lap. Her coat was soaked around the edges, and the scarf she'd wrapped so tightly around her neck now hung loose, revealing a small golden cross around her neck. Her face was still red from the cold, but her eyes had softened. She stared ahead, not really looking at anything, just breathing, letting the warmth slowly return to her bone. You warm enough? Elijah asked, keeping his tone light. She nodded, her voice low. Yes, thank you, young man. Thank you. He gave a small smile. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I came back when I did. Eleanor's eyes drifted toward the window. Snow rushed past like a fast-moving dream. I've walked that road before, years ago, but I didn't think the storm would get this bad. She paused, then added quieter. I didn't want to wait. Not tonight. Elijah didn't say anything right away. He let her words hang in the air, respected the weight in them. He'd heard that kind of voice before, the kind where people spoke more to themselves than to anyone else. After a few turns, he asked, You said your daughter's in the hospital? Eleanor nodded. Yes, she went into labor this afternoon. Her name is Olivia. She's my only child. He glanced over again. She lives far from you? No, she said softly. Only 10 minutes by car. Usually, but tonight her voice trailed off. I don't have a car anymore. Haven't driven in years. She told me to stay home. Said the storm was getting worse. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. There was something in the way she said it that caught him. Not fear exactly, more like urgency, a need that didn't want to be questioned. Elijah kept his hands on the wheel, turning carefully onto a narrower road leading out toward the edge of town. Do you live nearby? I do, she said and pointed ahead. The road past that gas station, then a left at the bend, little greenhouse with the wood chimney. He followed her directions, and within a few minutes, They pulled up in front of a small, weathered cottage tucked behind a patch of bare trees. The porch light was off, but a faint glow came from a side window. The roof was covered in snow, and the mailbox had been nearly buried. The place was modest, but not abandoned. It looked lived in, cared for. Elijah parked the van at the end of the short driveway and turned toward her. "You sure you want to go in? I can drive you straight to the hospital." Eleanor shook her head. "I need to get something first. It'll only take a minute." "I'll come with you," he said, already opening his door. She started to protest, but then nodded, too tired to argue. They stepped back into the cold, and Eleanor led him to the front door. She fumbled with the keys, hands still unsteady. Elijah gently took them and unlocked the door for her. Inside, the warmth was immediate, not from central heating, but from something older. A space heater hummed in the corner, and a wood stove crackled faintly in the kitchen. The place smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet like tea and old cookies. Photos lined the walls, framed pictures of a young girl in graduation robes, then later in uniform, and one where she stood at a podium with a microphone, smiling confidently. Elijah glanced at it but said nothing. Eleanor set her canvas bag down on the kitchen table and pulled out a folded shawl, a thermos, and a small pink box wrapped in ribbon. "This is for her," she said, holding up the box. "I made it months ago. It's a blanket for the baby. Took me almost 6 weeks." Elijah's throat tightened just a little. She looked up at him. "I was afraid if I waited until morning I might miss the moment. I know it's silly. She's a grown woman, but she's still my baby." "It's not silly," Elijah said quietly. "Not at all." Eleanor smiled. "Just a hint." And for the first time he saw the strength under her tiredness. She wasn't weak. She was worn maybe, but not broken. He helped her gather the things, placing the thermos and the pink box gently back in her bag. As they turned to leave, Elijah noticed a photo on the fridge. It was the same woman from the podium, only this time she was shaking hands with a group of officials. Seal in the background said, "State of Minnesota." He recognized the emblem. It belonged to the governor's office. He frowned slightly but said nothing, just followed Eleanor back out into the cold. The wind had picked up sharper, now biting harder. Elijah opened the van door and helped her back in. Before starting the engine, he hesitated. "You sure it's all right to go now? Roads aren't going to get easier." Eleanor nodded firmly. "I've come this far, Mr. Elijah," he said, starting the van. "Thank you, Elijah," she said, settling back in the seat. As they pulled away from the cottage, the house disappeared into the snow. Behind them, the storm was getting worse, but Elijah didn't turn back. He watched the road, one hand steady on the wheel, while Eleanor sat beside him, her hands folded over the little pink box. Neither of them spoke for a while, but in the quiet there was something stronger than words. Two strangers, brought together not by fate, not by coincidence, but by the simple refusal to let someone walk alone. The snow was coming down harder now, thick as cotton, swirling in wild gusts that rocked the van with each sudden blast of wind. Elijah leaned forward over the wheel, squinting through the smeared windshield. The defroster was struggling, barely keeping up. Every few minutes he had to reach over and wipe the inside of the glass with his sleeve, just to keep a sliver of clear vision. Eleanor sat beside him, bundled tightly in her coat, holding her canvas bag with both hands as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. The pink box was tucked carefully inside, pressed against her ribs. She didn't speak, but every few minutes he heard her breathe in sharply, like she was bracing herself. against something heavier than the storm. Still all right back there? He asked, glancing over without taking his eyes off the road for long. She nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes, just trying to stay calm. Elijah didn't answer right away. He pressed his lips together and focused on the road ahead. The snowplows hadn't reached this far. The van's tires crunched over uneven snow, and every so often the whole vehicle slipped slightly, enough to make his knuckles whiten on the wheel. Hospital's about 15 minutes out, he said. 20 if the road gets worse. Eleanor closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. I should have told her I was coming, but if I had, she would have sent someone to stop me. You think she wouldn't want you there? No, she said quietly. I think she wants me safe. That's the thing about being strong your whole life. People forget. You still need to show up for your children even when they've grown up. Elijah thought about that as he turned onto a stretch of road with no lights and no markings, just a vast blanket of white in every direction. His breathing grew shallower, the pressure in his chest rising with each mile. He'd driven in tough weather before, back when he worked for a medical transport service. But this storm felt different. He wasn't carrying equipment. He was carrying someone's mother. The van jerked slightly to the right. Elijah quickly turned the wheel, gently correcting, without slamming the brakes. He couldn't afford to panic. Not with her in the seat next to him. Eleanor didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she had, but she didn't flinch. She was staring straight ahead now, like the road itself had her full attention. Can I ask something? He said after a moment. She looked over. The picture on your fridge? He continued, voice careful. Your daughter? She's someone important, isn't she? Eleanor gave a faint smile. She is, to me anyway. I mean, that seal behind her looked like something official. Her shoulders lifted in a quiet sigh. She's the governor elected last year. Youngest in the state's history, they said. Smart, driven, stubborn as her father was. She paused, a flicker of memory moving through her eyes. She's doing good things, trying to help people that get left behind, like you probably feel most days. Elijah didn't say anything to that. He didn't need to. He'd felt invisible so often he'd stopped keeping track of the moments. But hearing her say it out loud, plain, direct, caught him off guard. He nodded once. You proud of her? Eleanor smiled again, this time fuller. Every day. Even when we argue, even when she thinks I don't understand the world she works in, I'm proud of her. But tonight I just wanted her to know she's not alone. That no matter how many people vote for her or stand behind her podiums, she's still someone's little girl, and her mother is still coming. Silence returned, heavy but warm. Elijah's jaw tightened as he watched the snow whip past the headlights. The wind had picked up, sending sharp bursts of powder across the windshield. He had to slow down more than once, and twice he felt the tires lose grip before catching again. They passed a fallen tree branch in the middle of the road. He veered, slightly, heart pounding, gripping the wheel until the van steadied again. Eleanor reached out once, her hand brushing the dashboard, but she didn't speak. Up ahead he saw flashing lights, a barricade, 2 highway patrol cars, with emergency lights blinking red and blue through the snow. He eased the van to a stop. A trooper stepped forward, coat pulled tight, face half covered in a scarf. Elijah rolled down the window. Sir, road's closed, the trooper said. Storm's too strong. We're not letting anyone through without an emergency permit. Elijah opened his mouth to respond, but Eleanor beat him to it. Her voice, though raspy, carried authority. My name is Eleanor Sterling. My daughter is in labor. She's the governor of this state, and I am not missing the birth of my first grandchild. Because of snow. The trooper hesitated, blinked, looked from her to Elijah, then back again. Hold on, ma'am, he said, stepping back to his radio. Elijah raised his eyebrows slightly. Eleanor didn't look away. A moment later, the officer returned, waving them forward. Proceed carefully, he said. Hospital. Still open. They're expecting you now. Elijah nodded once and rolled up the window. The van moved forward, tires groaning under the snow. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The road twisted, climbed slightly, then dipped toward the city. Through the fogged glass, Elijah could see the faint glow of hospital lights ahead, distant, steady, like a beacon. He glanced over at Eleanor. She was gripping her bag. Tighter now, eyes bright, lips pressed into a line, heart racing though she didn't show it. Elijah exhaled, focused on the road. The worst part was almost over, but in his chest the tension didn't lift. It deepened because something told him that when they walked through those hospital doors, he was going to learn something that would stay with him longer than this storm ever could. The automatic doors slid open. With a soft hiss and warm air rushed out to meet them as Elijah guided Eleanor through the hospital entrance. His coat was soaked through at the shoulders, snow melting down his collar, but he barely noticed. His hand hovered just behind Eleanor's back as she stepped inside slowly, the soft soles of her boots squeaking on the polished tile. The bright fluorescent lights above flickered for half a second before stabilizing, and for a moment the quiet of the hospital lobby swallowed them whole. It was nearly 2:30 in the morning. The waiting room was mostly empty, just one man asleep in a corner chair and a nurse behind the reception desk typing into a computer with glazed eyes. Christmas garlands hung on the wall behind her, a little lopsided, and a muted television showed a rerun of local news on the wall above the vending machines. Elijah recognized the woman on screen. He'd seen her face on billboards during the last election, poised, sharp, determined. Olivia Sterling, governor of Minnesota. Can I help you? The nurse asked, standing slowly. Her eyes moved from Elijah to Eleanor, her expression shifting almost instantly. We're here to see Olivia Sterling, Elijah said. This is her mother. She just had a baby. The nurse blinked twice, clearly processing what she just heard. The governor? She asked, looking at Eleanor again, this time with new eyes. Eleanor gave a small smile, her cheeks still flushed from the cold. She doesn't know I'm coming. I didn't call ahead. Before the nurse could respond, another voice cut through the space behind them. Oh my God, Mrs. Sterling. Young nurse in pink scrubs had just entered from the hallway leading to the maternity wing. Her eyes widened as she hurried over, concern mixed with something almost like awe. They've been looking for you for hours. The governor's been asking about you between contractions. She thought something happened when you didn't answer her call. I left the phone at home, Eleanor said softly, her voice cracking just a little. I didn't want to waste time. The nurse reached for her gently. Come on. She's awake. She had a little girl, 6. LB, perfect as can be. I'll take you to her. Eleanor looked back at Elijah. Wait here, he said, nodding. You go. Her eyes lingered on him, grateful but also conflicted. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. Instead, she gave his hand a small squeeze, then followed the nurse down the hallway, her canvas bag still clutched tightly under one arm. Elijah sat down on the nearest bench. The lobby was quiet again, except for the TV and the occasional beep of a distant monitor. His back ached and his fingers were still numb, but it didn't matter. Something inside him had settled. The kind of quiet you feel after doing something that mattered, even if no one else noticed except someone had noticed. Another nurse, a tall man in blue scrubs, walked past and gave him a nod that lingered a little longer than usual. Then a security guard from the entrance peeked into the lobby, looked at Elijah and gave a quick, respectful nod, too. No questions, no suspicion, just a moment of recognition. He didn't realize how rare that felt. Until now. 20 minutes passed, then 30. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't need distraction. He just waited, arms crossed, watching the empty hallway. Then the doors at the end of the corridor opened. Elijah stood up. Instinctively, Eleanor appeared first, slower now but steadier, and behind her, Olivia Sterling. No press, no guards, just her, hair tied back, face still, pale from labor, wearing a loose blue hospital gown, holding a tiny bundle of white cloth in her arms. She looked exhausted and radiant. When her eyes landed on Elijah, she paused just for a moment, like she had to process who he was, what this moment meant. Then she walked forward, each step deliberate. The baby stirred against her chest. "You're Elijah?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at her mother, then back at him. "I've been trying to call her all night. We thought she got stuck in the storm or worse." Elijah said nothing. It wasn't his place to explain what she'd been willing to risk. Eleanor stepped closer to her daughter and gently touched the baby's back. "She's perfect," she whispered. Olivia smiled. "She's strong like her grandmother." There was a silence that settled over them. Not awkward, not cold, just full. Like there were too many things that didn't need saying out loud. Olivia looked back at Elijah. "My mother says you found her walking in the middle of the storm, that you brought her home then drove her here. That true?" He nodded once, slow and steady. "She would have frozen out there," Olivia said, voice a little hoarse. "And I would have had to go through this without her." Elijah met her gaze. "She said she had to be here. I just gave her a ride." Olivia stepped closer and offered her hand. "Well, I don't care what you call it. You made sure my mother was there to hold my baby. That means something." Elijah took her hand. Her grip was firm. "I'd like to thank you properly," she said. "There's going to be a press conference later today, but before any of that, I just wanted to see you." Eleanor touched Olivia's arm gently. "He didn't do it for camera." "I know," Olivia said, looking back at him. "That's why it matters." Elijah looked down at the baby, still asleep, her tiny face just visible. Above the blanket's edge, a small pink hat with a hospital logo covered her head. She looked peaceful, safe. For a moment his chest tightened, not from exhaustion but from something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. That what he did mattered, that someone saw. Olivia stepped back. "Would you like to meet her?" He hesitated. "I should probably let you rest. She'll want to know this story one day," Eleanor said softly, "about how someone showed up when no one else would." Elijah stepped forward and looked at the baby again, this time closer. He didn't touch her, just watched her breathe. Then he looked up at Olivia. "You got a name for her yet?" Olivia smiled, looked at her mother, then back at him. "We were thinking Grace." Elijah nodded. "That's a good name." And for the first time that night, the storm outside no longer felt like the thing they had to survive. It felt like the thing that had brought them all together. The snow had stopped by. Morning. What had once been a fierce white storm now lay still across the city, like a clean sheet pulled over the past. The streets glistened under the pale sun, and the world, for a few hours, moved slower, as if it too was reflecting on the night before. Elijah stood at the edge of the State House steps, his delivery jacket freshly washed, the name patch still frayed but clean. He wasn't used to wearing anything other than work boots and carrying boxes, and now he was being asked to stand before cameras behind microphones beside flags. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, his breath visible in the cold morning air, hands tucked into his pockets to hide the nervous twitch in his fingers. Security officer gently ushered him forward as the governor stepped to the podium. Olivia Sterling wore a simple gray coat, her hair pulled back, her expression firm but warm. Eleanor stood a few steps behind her, gloved hands folded together, the same canvas bag resting at her side. The press conference had drawn more attention than expected. It wasn't just local news. National reporters had shown up after hearing that the governor had paused official duties to recognize a quiet act of heroism in the middle of a storm. Cameras clicked. Reporters adjusted their earpieces, but for Elijah none of it mattered. His eyes were fixed on Eleanor, who nodded gently when their eyes met. Olivia adjusted the microphone. Last night, she began. A man most of you have never heard of reminded me why public service matters, why humanity still matters. Her voice carried through the quiet square. While most people were safe inside while the city shut down and the roads closed, Elijah Davis turned his van around, not because anyone asked him to, not because he was paid to, but because he saw someone most people would have driven past and decided she mattered. She paused, glancing toward him. That someone was my mother, and because of him she was able to be there when her granddaughter came into the world. A murmur moved through the crowd. Elijah shifted again, uncomfortable but standing tall. Olivia continued, we talk often about policy, budgets, power, but leadership begins with empathy, action, sacrifice. Mr. Davis reminded me, and I hope reminded all of us, that decency doesn't need a title. It just needs courage. She turned to him and extended a small plaque, engraved in silver. He took it, hesitantly, reading the words, in recognition of uncommon kindness in the face of a common storm. The applause was quiet at first, then grew. Not explosive, not performative, but real, full of something rarely given freely. Respect. Elijah didn't speak. He simply nodded, then stepped back beside Eleanor. She reached for his hand, without a word, squeezing at once. After the camera shut down and the press began to disperse, Olivia walked over and pulled him aside. You going back to work today? She asked. Elijah gave a small smile. Same route, different weather. You ever think about doing something different? Sometimes, he said. But people still need their groceries, even in the snow. She nodded. Well, if you ever want a different kind of job, something where more people listen when you speak, let me know. He didn't promise anything. He didn't decline. He just nodded again, the way people do when they're used to carrying weight alone but aren't sure what it means to set it down. Later that afternoon, Elijah returned to his van. The roads were clearer now, the deliveries lighter, but as he slid into the driver's seat and looked out over the quiet city, the plaque resting in the passenger seat, he felt something shift inside him. Not pride exactly, and not relief, just acknowledgement. A simple truth that for once in a world quick to overlook men like him, someone had seen what he did, not with headlines, not with hashtags, but with presence. Real human presence. He started the engine. Outside the city, breathed. The storm was gone, but its memory lingered. In the hands that had reached out, in the road turned back on, and in the name Grace, whispered by a governor, born in a blizzard, cradled by a mother who had walked through the night and carried by a man who simply didn't keep driving. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.